Hello, it's Film Frenzy, and today I'll be doing my latest movie ranking. After just watching Deadpool 2, I think it's perfect time to rank all 11 of Fox's X-Men Universe films, starting right away with number 11, the worst of the bunch, X-Men Origins Wolverine, the first ever Wolverine film, and it's a prequel to the original X-Men series. So, with X-Men Origins Wolverine, there's a reason everybody calls this the worst X-Men film, and I totally agree. Well, first off, the plot is just written with cliches. Like the action scenes are just very cliched. The whole thing with its origin story, it's like pretty much everything wrong with like origin stories and why all these new superhero films have kind of shied away from that. Like how Spider-Man: Homecoming and Black Panther, they're not origin movies, stuff like that. Because partly because like movies like this where they just ruin origin movies for everybody. Like with it, the characters like Hugh Jackman does a great job as Wolverine, like always, but the plot is just kind of dumb and just a lot of like been there, done that. And it like kind of doesn't have the poignancy that like the original, well, the first two X Men have. X Men Last Stand, not so much. But like, and also just like ruins like certain characters. Like for example, the whole team. Like it's kind of cool like to see all these new mutants like in the Weapon X program, but they like don't give any of them screen time except for like mostly just Deadpool, who they just completely ruin, and they make fun of that a lot in Deadpool. So I guess the silver line to this movie is that it can be made fun of like crazy in the Deadpool films. But that shouldn't be the best part of the movie. Then another character they ruin is Gambit. They has very little screen time, and they randomly just introduce him just for the heck of it, and it's just plain dumb. Like it doesn't fit with the plot. They introduce like a young Cyclops. They have all this like other like weird plots of going on, and then Stryker's just like stereotypical Stryker. Like I hate how they use Stryker as a villain so many different times during so many different eras. He was perfect in X-Men 2, and this kind of just like worsens like him in X-Men 2 because he just did so poorly in this movie. So overall for this movie, I'll give the score about a 2 out of 5. I liked it more when I was younger, when I thought it was just kind of a cool film, but going back and reading the plot, I realized that's just really dumb. Don't even get me started on that Wolverine romance, so that's why it's coming in as the worst X-Men film. At the 10th spot, I have X-Men The Last Stand, the final film in the original X-Men trilogy. So there's a massive jump in quality from X-Men Origins Wolverine and X-Men The Last Stand, but this is still not a great movie. I actually did give it a thumbs up, so that means 10 of the 11 X-Men films I gave a thumbs up, so that's pretty great. I think it's overall an excellent series. This one specifically, I gave a 2.75 out of 5, so barely that thumbs up. But here's my positives for it. First off, it has a lot of just cool mutants introduced. As a little kid, when I first saw like the original trilogy, this was kind of my favorite in a way because I was like, this is like the most exciting and fun film. It's not that long. It's like hour 44 minutes, and it's got some crazy like awesome action. There's tons of like characters. There's like all these different like cool plots in a way, like the Phoenix and the Cure plot. But when you actually like think about it, this movie is just way worse than the original two X-Men. So like everything that I like loved about it is kind of also bad. Like there's way too many new mutants introduced, so they're not focusing as much on the great mutants introduced in X-Men 1 and 2 that like have deep story. So there's not as many deep storylines in this movie. The Cure is a really just an interesting moral question, but when they also have like the whole like big battle between like Magneto's people and Xavier's people, plus the whole Phoenix plotline, all crammed together, it just like doles out each of the three plotlines into being just a bunch of like mediocre subplots, but there's no true main plot to hold the whole movie together. And I think that's a huge problem. They kind of ruined Phoenix. Hopefully they get Phoenix right with next year's X-Men Dark Phoenix, just like how they redid Deadpool and got him right. But this movie, like, it also just kind of ruins some other characters, like Juggernaut. They make a joke, and overall, like, there's some good dialogue in here, but like, it's just a mess, and it creates just a lot of continuing issues for the franchise in the future. Like Xavier coming back to life, Magneto still having some of his powers at the end, Mystique being turned to human. It's just a whole mess, this movie, and it's not terrible, but it's certainly nowhere near great. Coming in at the 9th spot, I have X-Men Apocalypse, the third film in the X-Men First Class trilogy. So I would call X-Men Apocalypse insanely similar in how I critique it and praise it to X-Men The Last Stand, in that they're both like third films in like a trilogy, and they're the weakest film in that trilogy, and they kind of just have too many plot lines. They have some good aspects, but a lot of bad aspects too. So X-Men Apocalypse is slightly better. I'd give it a 3 out of 5, and My reason why it's a little better is because I think the themes are a little bit stronger here. Because, like, for example, there's some very emotional scenes, like when Magneto, played by Michael Fassbender, takes Xavier to like where Auschwitz was and stuff. So there's some, like, I think there's some more emotional scenes in this film than like X-Men: The Last Stand. And the acting, like the performances, are spectacular. The villain is very weak here. Oscar Isaac is not used well as Apocalypse. Like, his plan makes sense, and there are a lot of stakes, which I love when there are a lot of stakes. But like, he's just kind of like your standard villain who just wants world domination. There's really nothing to him, which is a shame because he could have been a great villain. I mean, he's the world's first mutant, for crying out loud. I do love how they introduce these new mutants. I think they do a pretty good job with introducing young Cyclops, Jean Grey, Storm, Nightcrawler. So I think that's pretty good. And I think like the past like films, like, you know, like Xavier, Mystique, and like Magneto and Beast and stuff, I think they're all used well, and I love Quicksilver's sequence in this film. Not nearly as good as the X-Men Days of Future Past sequence, but still pretty fun. So this is overall just it's a pretty solid movie that's just very overlong, too many plot threads and lines, but it's still not bad. At number 8, I have a bit of a surprising pick, Deadpool, the first ever R-rated X-Men spin-off. I know, this is an insane pick, and you'll probably think it's way too far back, but don't turn off the video just yet. Hear me out. So, I think Deadpool is awesome. It'd probably be like in the top 3 for enjoyability out of the X-Men films, but I just love this series so much that it only makes number 8. So I actually give it a very good score. It's a huge jump up from the last 3. I give it a 4 out of 5. So I like this movie a lot. I just love all the other 7 a lot, like, just more. Like, this movie is hilarious. It's definitely the funniest of all the X-Men films. I love how, like, starts in the middle of the plot and then goes back and stuff. It's just really fun. It's a great, fast-paced film. Great romance. The dialogue is great. I love the drama. The drama scenes are just really well done, surprisingly. Ryan Reynolds is a superb actor. He is perfect as Deadpool. The villain is very weak, though. Ajax in the film, like, just very standard. But I love, like, the revenge plot. It's like, it's just a little bit too simple for my liking. Like, it just can be summed up very quickly on how Deadpool, he basically turns into, like, he has cancer. He turns into, like, this, like, person with superpowers, but, like, he's, like, physically just, like, messed up now. And he goes on trying to, like, get back his girl, but is nervous too because he doesn't know how she'll think, like, what he looks like, but he wants to kill bad guy who, like, turned him into this, Ajax. So, like, it's just kind of simple, but the action sequences are superb, and it's just such a fun ride overall. There's so many great jokes, but it just doesn't have its core themes that some of these top 7 will have. At number 7, I have The Wolverine, which I believe to be the most underrated X-Men film and the second Wolverine solo movie. So you probably think I'm crazy for putting the Wolverine above Deadpool, but here's why. So first off, I think this is the most underrated X-Men film because, like, it only got about 69% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I think that's just too low. I understand that the third act is a little bit of a mess and just a little bit cliched for a comic book film, with all the just like the kind of stereotypical just like action that you've seen from the, like, previous Wolverine film and the previous X-Men films. And yeah, I don't think it's great, and I think it really just tonally does not match the first 2/3 of the film. But the first 2/3 are this brilliant like action, like, drama film that really shows the roots of where Logan would come from, because they're both directed by James Mangold, and just it's excellent. I think has great themes of immortality, very unique villain. Now it's like an old man who just, like, wants Logan's immortality, and I think, like, the love interest is more interesting than in, like, X-Men Origins Wolverine. I love the Japanese setting. I think it's a really well-made film and how it all comes together. Besides that third act, it's not terrible by any means, in my opinion, but I just don't think it matches the rest of the film. But I overall, I just love the action sequences. They're very violent, brutal, and they're just really awesome. I think they really signal where Logan would come from. So overall, I think I'm going to give this movie like a 4.25 out of 5. It is very solid, but it's not perfect. At the 6th spot, I have the movie that started all, the original X-Men. Some say that it was Blade that started the modern superhero movies phase, or it was Spider-Man, but I personally think it was X-Men, the original. This movie was like one of the first superhero movies to have like a core theme. This is all about persecution, and I think it perfectly mirrors the comics and how it shows the two different men, Xavier and Magneto, and how they think of, like, mutants and their persecution, to mirror, like, the 60s with Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. It's just perfect. This movie, yeah, it's a little outdated in some of the action scenes, and it's just this little bit of a slower superhero movie, and it requires a lot of exposition, but that's very understandable, so it's not going to be in the top 5, but it is spectacular for being the first in a series, and it has some great characters, superb acting with like Hugh Jackman. I think Anna Paquin as Rogue is great. The villain, like Magneto, of course, is one of the best super villains of all time, if not the best. This movie just really is like the epitome of what X-Men is, and I think they just do a great job at showing the theme, the action, and just like has a great plot, which is superb conversations. You can tell that there's some great movies ahead. Now in the top 5, I have the latest X-Men Universe film, Deadpool 2. So this movie really defied my expectations. As you saw, I think Deadpool's a little overrated. I put it not super high on my list, but this movie I absolutely love. I think it improves on the original a lot. And no, it's not nearly as funny, though the jokes that it uses are hilarious, especially the references to like the DC universe, the MCU, and like other X-Men films like Wolverine and Logan. But the movie is just so good with this drama too, because the first Deadpool movie I felt like too quickly snapped back into crazy comedy, and this movie has a lot of comedy, but the drama I feel like is just really strong here, and just a more tonally balanced movie, and has some really solid themes on family and stuff, and just how like Deadpool really grows as a character. Cable's a superb character too, and I think the kid Russell, he's an excellent character also. I loved him in it. Domino was fun. This movie just has a lot of great characters. It's pretty crazy, the plot and stuff. It's a very unique superhero movie plot, and how there's not really much of a villain. I'm not going to do any spoilers here, but I think it's just a unique plot, some solid themes, great comedy, awesome action, and great characters just make this movie really solid. It starts off a little slow and just kind of a little awkward at first, so I'm giving it a 4.5 out of 5, but it is definitely one of the best X-Men films. At the number 4 spot, I have X-Men 2, the original sequel to the first X-Men film. Just like how X-Men defined the modern superhero movie, X-Men 2 defined the modern superhero sequel in expanding upon the first one and improving it greatly. It didn't spend all that time doing the world building that the first one had, so it could expand but not repeat on the persecution theme, and instead has the heroes and Magneto and Mystique binding together to fight against Stryker, who's an excellent villain. This is the original Stryker, not that crappy version, X-Men Origins Wolverine. And he makes a great villain. It's very different than the first one in how they're fighting Magneto instead. So it's a very different movie than the first movie, and also just expands on the theme with great conversations and dialogue. This feels more like a sci-fi drama like Gattaca than a superhero movie. It only has a couple great action sequences like mixed in. Has great new characters like Nightcrawler and Pyro. Expands upon Iceman, who's an awesome character. And the only really problems are like it's a little outdated now. It's kind of a slower pace, which I'm okay with. And also the effects are a little like outdated with like the fire effects that Pyro has and stuff like that. And it can be a little overly confusing. Prime example being that hallucination scene inside like Cerebro or whatever. That was very confusing. But overall, this movie is just spectacular and one of the best of the X-Men series. Now in the top 3, I have X-Men First Class, the film that redefined the X-Men series with a whole new trilogy. X-Men First Class, I absolutely love when I first saw it. I've seen it numerous times because, one, it's just a flat-out fun movie. This was just perfect and like just bring back the X-Men films because it had just been 2 years before. This was 2011. 2 years before, there was X-Men Origins Wolverine, which sucked. 3 years before that, X-Men The Last Dance. So this was the first great X-Men film since 2003, 8 years before with X-Men 2. So this movie really just ushered in a new era for the X-Men films. And I love that about it. It started a whole new trilogy. It's great. These characters, I think this is the best at introducing new characters of any other X-Men film because these characters are just so well fleshed out, partially because they're like younger versions of past characters. I think perfectly cast. Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique, James McAvoy as Professor X, and Michael Fassbender as Magneto. Script's fantastic. This is probably the best film to do anything involving like the whole theme about like the persecution of the X-Men, and I love that period setting of the 60s. Overall, this is just an excellent film. There are some like tonal inconsistencies when switching from drama to humor, but it is hilarious. It is really funny movie, so I think that's great, and I wish there was some Wolverine besides that one cameo, but overall this is a super awesome film and one of the best, so I'm giving it a 4.75 out of 5. And number 2, I have X-Men Days of Future Past, the kick-butt sequel to X-Men First Class. Days of Future Past is very unique in the whole X-Men series for having such core sci-fi elements in the plot. Like, time travel plays a huge role. Yes, it's a little bit in Deadpool 2, but that's just more just to get Cable into the plot. While this movie relies on it greatly. And I think that's for the best. Because it really just shows like Wolverine being Wolverine the best. He's really great in this film. Hugh Jackman does a great job. I loved seeing Professor X, Patrick Stewart version, and Ian McKellen's Magneto back in action. They were great. I love the whole like the genocide because I think it's almost taking the persecution theme even further. I know like you're probably thinking how could they do more with it? But it ended up working out because, I mean, a pure genocide, it was intense. Like, with the Sentinels and everything, this movie, I thought it was just really just redefined and reached a new high for the series. And it was the best movie in the series for a couple years. I mean, I loved it. I love the whole time travel aspect. I think it was smart to fix the continuity by wiping stuff. Though, most of the flaws kind of have to do with continuity and that like it doesn't really carry over as much from previous films. And then the wipe doesn't really translate to future films also. But overall, I think this movie is just really excellent. I love the characters. I think the biggest like character development was with Professor X, James McAvoy's version, as he grows a lot throughout the film. I think that's great. Overall, this is just a very emotional, but very plot heavy and just great action-wise movie. That's just the complexity of the originals, but more fast-paced. And finally, I've come to the best X-Men film of the 11 featured, and this is Logan, the 2017 drama that's the third in the Wolverine trilogy. I'm going to go right out the bat and say, Logan is my favorite superhero movie of all time. In fact, one of my favorites of any movie of all time. I freaking love it. Perfect 5 out of 5. This got great reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, 93%. So glad about it. There's a reason that this movie got nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay at the Oscars. It's because it's that good. The screenplay is just great dialogue, so meaningful, like the themes on what's important in life, family, and how Logan, like the whole arc of him trying to get like meaning in his life, and finally he achieves that at the end of the movie when he finally says, so this is what it feels like. Talking about like having some people he cares about, like with Laura, who's great. The actress that plays her is perfect. Patrick Stewart is amazing. It's a sin he was not nominated for supporting actor. Same with Hugh Jackman for lead actor for Logan. This movie with the just best like choreography of any like fight scenes I have ever seen in my life. I love the action of this movie. The cinematography of the desert landscape's beautiful. It can get a little slow in the second act, but I didn't mind that at all. And yes, the villain is kind of weak, but that's not the point of the movie. The movie's focusing on the villain, the heroes, and all their individual arcs. Like, all of them just have these great arcs, and it's just beautiful. This movie defies the superhero genre and just lifts it, just transcends the superhero movies in all ways. And this feels more like a neo-noir western than a superhero movie, and kind of more like Unforgiven, which is one of my favorite movies of all time also. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed my ranking of all 11 X-Men Universe films. Comment down below what you think of the X-Men films, and sorry that this video got a little bit too long, but like and subscribe for more awesome movie content from Film Frenzy. See you guys later.